So, I mentioned on Friday morning, I think we are literally in a revolution now that's only going to intensify. And I believe the next 5 years are absolutely crucial. And we need to turn all of this movement into systemic change, into culture, law, governance, policy. A year from now, we're going to be weeks away from the federal elections in this country. I believe we're going to see an enormous progressive wave and a huge swing of the pendulum next year. And part of the reason things are going to change at that level politically is that there is such a movement from below. And it's also coming at the local level, at the regional level, cities, states, governors, subnational alliances, all the stuff we've been talking about. I would not underestimate the scale of change that is underway now. This is the time to be bold, to really go for it. I think the things Stan is talking about here, to challenge these most basic assumptions, this is it. I mean, this is really it. It's showtime. The shadow side of that is also going to be the more things destabilize, the more chaos there is, the more uncertainty. That is when the dark forces use fear to manipulate, to bring in authoritarian regimes, militarization. We have to be really on guard about all of this at the same time. And I think we have a window of the next 2-3 years before that kind of a hammer is going to come down, as well as the ongoing severity of climate disruption, which is going to really create chaos. I mean, we know this. So let's hope we've got this window. We're going to be doing some programming next year at the 2016 conference that is really about very specific moves into policy, law, governance in a number of areas that we've already talked about. We're going to do a big thing on the gender reconciliation and women's leadership next year, which we believe is absolutely foundational to any meta change that's going to happen. And we're very excited also about the collaboration with Biomimicry Institute, which is a very long-term one. As you know, Janine Benyus first spoke here in 1997. And biomimicry needs to become the default position for all design and industry by 2020, okay? So we'll be doing a very deep dive into a lot of that next year. And in fact, it's happening. I mean, this is not pie in the sky or a pipe dream or any of that. It's actually well underway. And the companies that don't adopt these practices are going to be left in the dust. So we're going to see a lot of shift in that area. We're also very keen about going global again and bringing Bioneers out into the world. We hope you'll join us in Spain next year if you can. And we're in discussions other places in the world as well. So I think this is global. We've got to think globally and act non-locally as well as locally. But and I do invite all of you too. Brandon talked a little bit yesterday. We've had a big surge of production of our media the last 2.5 years and produced over 35 of these themed collections, which are really the greatest hits. I mean, this stuff is just absolutely outstanding. If you want real education, this is the stuff. And it's not just for schools, it's for salons, for house parties, for a community screening. Become a Bioneers media pollinator. Okay, take it out. Create conversations wherever you go. It's the most subversive thing you can do. And yeah, so I mean, that was mainly what I want to say. This has been an absolute blast. I actually always hate to see it end. People ask me if I'm tired. I'm not. I'm energized, It's just absolutely a joy to be with you all. We so appreciate your companionship, your partnership, and your support. And we're, as Josh likes to put it, we're moving from being an annual to a perennial. We've got stuff going on all year long. Our headquarters is out here in the Bay now. We're thrilled. It's been a great move for us to do that. This is our home in many ways. So thank you, thank you, thank you. My heart is just so full and my head is spinning and I've just got 50 things I want to do tomorrow morning. So thank you.
And I feel like as I reflect on this weekend, part of what I'm really struck with is how much we're all engaging on the inner levels as well as on the outer levels. Carl Jung said that the feminine is our inner space. and it's part of what's been neglected too long. And to meet all of the things that Kenny just mentioned, we need to be grounded, we need to be centered, we need to be slowed down. We actually need to be fully in our bodies, which we've had a lot of training to not do, you know? So it actually takes attention and care and practice to fully inhabit this magnificent instrument that nature has given each of us, not only in the physical realm, but in the emotional and the spiritual realms as well. So I'm just really thankful that all of you are engaged in the ways that you are, at reintegrating all of ourselves, at bringing ourselves so fully and wholeheartedly to this moment that we face. I don't think any of us is here by accident at this time, and it's a tremendous privilege and opportunity to be in this family together. And so I really thank you for that. And I think I want to say, well, let me just think, there was one other thing I wanted to say. Well, I want to thank Josh. I really want to appreciate what Josh has brought to this amazing co-creation. Because really, you know, as I look at the whole living system of Bioneers, he has been filling gaps that actually really needed to be filled. He has been reconnecting the web of community all over the Bay Area, all through this year, going tirelessly to events and helping people see. I think for many years, Bioneers was like a visiting relative, you know? And we would sort of parachute in at conference time, and everybody in the Bay Area was like, where you been? And now that's not true anymore. And that's really largely due to Josh's tireless gallivanting and representing and being like the most extraordinary, really, representative of Bioneers, and Brandon too. A big shout out, thank you. And generationally too, I feel like Josh has just brought all this life force into Bioneers in ways that we can all feel. It's a little hard to name sometimes, but it's reinvigorating our whole system, and I'm so grateful for that. And the last thing I want to say is, as a living system, the only way I could ever have imagined spending 26 years of my life doing one thing is that it changes all the time, right? It's never the same. And so I especially want to ask you to participate with us in the feedback way, because that's how living systems evolve. And so we really need your feedback. Tell us what worked. Tell us what ideas you have. Tell us what you want to see different. There are feedback forums. There'll be ways online to do it. And so I would ask your partnership in feeding us with your feedback, because it's really important to us, and we really take it very seriously and with a lot of love. So thank you.
You know, I often describe Kenny and Nina as modern-day Johnny Appleseeds that went around scattering seeds, and I was one of the seeds, and we all are, I think, one of the seeds that germinated and blossomed and grew. And I look at these, this is listed as our closing remarks, but I look at them really as our rebirthing and reopening remarks, which is to say, let's reopen the conversation starting today, to carry it throughout the year. Let's explore new ways that this mycelium that is the community of Bioneers can connect. Nina offered an invitation for your input. I would offer an invitation for your connectivity. How can we grow this network? What can we do with you, the small office of staffers that we have full-time in Santa Fe, in San Francisco, and Portland, and in Oregon, to work with you to tell our story? Where should we be? What organizations and communities should we be in conversation with? Should we be in partnership with? I ask that you share that story with me and with us throughout the year. Think of us. The door is open. The email, what have you, phone, call. Be a part of the community. Share it with us. Let us help us grow it. You are the community. Thank you.
you.
Thank you. Okay, we're in for one amazing treat now. So sit tight. Just a sec. Luisah Teish is amazing. She is a teacher, a priestess, and an author, especially of an amazing book, which I would commend to you, called Jambalaya, the Natural Woman's Book of Personal Charms and Practical Rituals. She is an Oshun chief of the Yoruba Lakumi tradition. And Tish, whose name actually means adventuresome spirit, has said, "My tradition is very celebratory. There's always music, dance, song, and food in our services, as well as a sense of reverence for the children. It's joyful as well as meditative." So please join me in welcoming one truly remarkable woman who we are deeply blessed and honored to have with us, who will help us transition from this story and this ceremony into the next. Join me in welcoming Luisah Teish. And Afia walking tree.
Now, y'all know that this here is going to be an interactive thing, right? Okay, you know that, right? Okay. I want to close this conference with a very, very famous story that comes out of Ghana, West Africa, and I want to dedicate it to my son, who is there in the hospital, who will be released tomorrow due to the kindness of good people. Yes? Yes? Okay? And this story comes from a period of time in human history when human beings had forgotten that everything in nature could talk. And it's called talking. Now, the way this story goes, I repeat the same thing over and over as the story progresses. The first two times I tell the story, you listen. But every time after that, when I point to you, you have to say what I said last time. So that means you're really going to pay attention, right? And it also means that you'll be able to take this story home and do it with your people. Yeah, because you'll have it memorized the indigenous way. Are you ready for this? Okay. Now, you see, this here is not just a regular stool. This is the golden stool of the Ashanti royalty. And when I, as royalty, sit here, anything I say becomes law. How about that? You like that? Okay, so now we start out not in the royal court, but on the farm. And the way the story goes, one day, the farmer went out to his yam farm, and when he reached down to pick up a yam, the yam said, "Get your hands off of me." He heard somebody laugh. It was the dog. And the dog said, "Listen to your yam." He went over to the tree to break off a branch to beat that dog, but the tree said, "Put that branch down." He tried to lay that branch on a rock, and the rock said, "Get that thing off of me." So, whoa, it was too much for the farmer, and he went running down the street. As he was running down the street, he came upon a fisherman who had his fishing net on his head. And the fisherman said, "Brother, why is a grown man running down the street on a hot African morning like this?" And the farmer said, "Mister, you're not going to believe this, but this morning, when I went out to my farm, I reached down to pull up a yam, and the yam said, 'Get your hands off of me.' I heard somebody laugh. It was the dog. And the dog said, 'Listen to your yam.' I went over to break off a branch to beat that dog, and the tree said, 'Put that branch down.' I tried to lay that branch on the rock, and the rock said, get that thing off of me. So, whoa, it was too much for me, and I came running down the street. The fisherman looked at him and he said, you know what? You lying. And just then his fishing net said, no, he's telling the truth. So, whoa, the fisherman went running down the street along with the farmer. As they were running down the street, they came upon a weaver who had his weaving cloth on his shoulder. And the weaver said, what is two grown men doing running down the street like this on a hot African morning? The farmer said, mister, you're not going to believe this, but this morning when I went out to my yam farm, I reached down to pick up a yam, and the yam said, I heard somebody laugh. It was the dog, and the dog said, I went over to the tree to break off a branch to beat that dog, but just then the tree said, I went to lay that branch on a rock, and the rock said, so, whoa, it was too much for me, and I came running down the street, and when I came upon this fisherman, he had his fishing net on his head. When I told him my story, he said I was lying, but just then his fishing net said. So, the weaver said, yeah, even if that is true, that ain't no reason for two grown men to run. And just then his weaving cloth said, you'd run too if it happened to you. So, whoa, he threw off his cloth and he went running down the street with the other men. As they were running down the street, they came upon a man who had taken off all his clothes and got in the river to bathe. As they come running, the man looked up and he said, brothers, what are three grown men doing running down the street on a hot African morning like this? And the farmer said, mister, you're not going to believe this, but this morning when I went to my yam farm, I reached down to pull up a yam, and the yam said, I heard somebody laugh. It was the dog, and the dog said, well, I went over to the tree to break off a branch to beat that dog, but the tree said, as I tried to put that branch on the rock said, so, whoa, it was too much for me, and I went running down the street. I come upon this fisherman. I told him my story, and he said I was lying, but just then his fishing net said, so, woo, he threw off his fishing net, and we come running down the street. We came upon the weaver, and when I told the weaver my story, he said, even if it is true, that ain't no reason for two grown men to run. But just then his weaving cloth said. So, whoa, he threw off his weaving cloth, and that's why we running down the street. The man in the river said, I see. Now let me tell you, it's hot. Y'all been running, and your brains done melted down. Now, why don't you take off your clothes and get in the river with me and cool off? Well, the farmer didn't know what else to do, so he took off his slipper and he walked to the edge of the river, and just as he dipped his foot in, the river jumped up and said, I don't want them in here. And the naked man jumped up and went running down the street with the other fellas. Now, word has come to the Asentahi, to the royal court, that there's a disturbance in the village today. And so he sends his guards to fetch the disturbers. They come in escorted by soldiers, and the Asentahi says, now you know, I heard that there were no vegetables in the marketplace today, farmer. There was no fish either, fisherman. And my wife has been up in my face about her cloth, weaver. And he tried to figure out, should he shoot him or should he just put him in jail? Explain yourself. He looked and saw this naked man, and now he's really upset. What's going on here? And the farmer stepped forward and he said, oh, your highness, oh, your grace, oh, most powerful one. I know you're not going to believe this, but this morning when I went out to my farm, I tried to pick up a yam so there would be some in the market, but when I reached down to pick up that yam, the yam said, I heard somebody laugh, and it was the dog. And the dog said, well, I wasn't going to take that mess off of no dog, so I went over to the tree to break off a branch to beat that dog, but then the tree said, and I tried to lay that branch on the rock, but the rock said, so, whoa, it was too much for me, and I went running down the street, and I ran up on the fisherman. He was about to go fishing. Yes, he was. And when I told him my story, he said I was lying, but just then his fishing net said, so, whoa, he threw down his net, and he came running down the street with me, and we came up on the weaver. He had your wife's cloth. I'm telling you, he really did have it. But when I told him my story, he said, even if it is true, that ain't no reason for grown men to run. But just then his weaving cloth said, so, whoa, oh, my Lord. Then we came upon this poor, innocent, naked man who was in the river minding his own business. He wasn't bothering nobody. He was just trying to cool off, you know. And when I told him our story, he said, well, it's hot and your brain's melting down, so why don't you get in here and cool off with us? And we were going to do it, but when I went to the edge of the river and I put my foot in, the river jumped up and said, and then your guards came and got us and brought us here, and that's the truth, oh merciful King. And the king said, I see. You think the king is a fool, don't you? Now I ask you, audience, should he shoot him? No. Should he put him in jail? No. Well, he wanted to be a just king, so he said, I tell you what. It is 10:30 right now. Farmer, I want to see some vegetables in the marketplace by 11, you understand? And the farmer said, oh yeah, there must be some vegetables that ain't talking somewhere. I'll find them. He said, fisherman, fish by noon. And the fisherman said, yes, my lord. Yes, absolutely. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And he said to the weaver, if you don't get my wife some cloth in a hurry so I can get some peace, you will suffer. And the weaver said, yes, she'll have the finest cloth before the day is out. And then the king looked at the naked man and he said, and if you don't cover your ass in the next 3 minutes, I'm going to throw you in jail. And the naked man said, yes, king. Thank you, king. Thank you very much, king. And after they left, the king sat down on his stool and he said, what is this village coming to? The people think I'm an idiot. They come in here with stories about talking vegetables, dogs and trees, fishing nets and fabric, and rivers that are giving all kinds of commands. That's the dumbest story I ever heard. And when the king got up to walk out, the golden stool said, it was a funny story if you ask me. And whoa, the king went running out of the castle. chose that as the closing story because I want you to remember that all of nature is alive. It is constantly communicating with us. Our ancestors have always known this. It's time for us to not be like the characters in this story who have forgotten how to communicate with the yams and the trees and the dogs in the water. So I want you to take that home, spread it around, and listen to your yam.